Hello, welcome to Revenant Reads. I'm Vin, and this is another edition of Fresh Red Kills. So, Fresh Red Kills are the videos where I talk about the books I have recently finished reading. And I'm going to be talking about two ancient history books that I read for the first quarter of Historathon 2025. Historathon 2025 is a year-long reading event. It's the third year we've been doing this, where we read, discuss, and celebrate nonfiction history. We divide the year up into 3-month-long quarters, each quarter looking at a different time period. If you want to participate, you would read a nonfiction history book that dealt with that time period. If you do all 4 time periods, you fully participated in Historathon. Now, it's an event that I created, and I've got great co-hosts that go along with me. Their links will be down below. Yeah, I'm going to definitely read more than one in a quarter. So these are two that I had wanted to get to the last couple of years for Historathon. So I made these a priority at the beginning of January to finally get these done. Especially this one, which I've had for a long time on the shelf. So I'm going to be talking about AD 381 and Alaric the Goth. So let's start with this one, which I read first. So this is Charles Freeman's. Okay, so we got AD 381, Heretics, Pagans, and the Dawn of the Monotheistic State. So this was, I guess, a byproduct of Charles Freeman's The Closing of the Western Mind. And so it's kind of an extension of that, and there's definitely some overlap. I haven't read the other one, but he explains that at the beginning of the book. And he is especially here looking at Emperor Theodosius's decision to, through his, command as emperor, to make the Nicene Creed, the kind of idea that the Trinity, the Holy Trinity, Father, Son, Holy Ghost, they are all one substance and equal, making that into law all throughout Rome. And this was a major act that really went against the way that things had been done up until that point. So he talks about how even after Constantine converted to Christianity, he pretty much passed laws that said that, yes, Christians can freely, practice their religion, but so can pagans. Basically everybody can find their own way towards God. And that was upheld for quite a long time after Constantine. But under Theodosius, things started really changing. And Theodosius, Freeman really emphasizes, was not a theologian. He was a politician, and he was just trying to create some kind of uniformity and order in the empire. So basically, he said that everybody has to believe in the Holy Trinity, all being one substance, as the Nicene Creed says. And what that had never really been done before. And what he says that does, what Freeman says that does, is it ended up stopping all conversation. Used to have, not just pagans and Christians in open dialogue and talking about, the nature of the universe and God and all that, but you had Christians able to do that as well. I mean, there was no one Christianity, it was Christianities. There was all these people with all these differing opinions. And by silencing all those others, Freeman goes into, you're basically creating heresy at that point. It made it so we basically were lost to time. Actually, some really good thinkers and people who were far more, preaching or, speaking about tolerance, just because they might have believed that Jesus was subordinate to God. Just that one little thing ended up basically blocking out all sorts of really valuable and interesting voices. And it creates this, basically going forward, we have heresies, we have blasphemies. It was a totally new world, basically, after Theodosius decided to do this. And he even goes into, afterwards, other thinkers trying to, through rational thought and logic, try to explain the Holy Trinity and how they can all be the same substance, and often failing. But even just the attempt can open them up to charges of blasphemy. So that's kind of what he's getting at here. I think he does a pretty good job. He's pretty thorough. There's a lot of information in here. Even though it's not a really long book, there's a lot of stuff going on. But yeah, the effects of Theodosius's decision to do that and how it really changed everything. So yeah, I would definitely recommend this. I thought this was a good history, good, really interesting moment in time in religious and intellectual history, one that had far-reaching effects, thousands of years even to the modern day. And it actually ended up being a pretty good companion piece to this. So I read this one afterwards, not realizing, I just didn't think about it too hard. Now I realized they're basically talking about the same time period for the most part. So this is Alaric the Goth. An Outsider's History of the Fall of Rome by Douglas Boin. And I overall enjoyed this book, but I definitely did have some, some frustrations here and there. So first of all, the title is kind of misleading. It's not really about Alaric. It would help you if you read this to know the story of Alaric already. It's not laid out for you. Instead, this is more of a look, and he kind of gets into it in the beginning about why it's this way, and I'm not opposed to it, but it did make for some confusing points. Essentially, he's saying that, we don't know all about Alaric, but we do know enough through archaeology and through what other people wrote, that we can kind of reconstruct his life. That's even then not really the point. The point of the book is to look at this point in time in Rome. And whereas Freeman was focusing on the idea of like heresy and orthodoxy and all that, and religion, this is focusing more on ideas of immigration and citizenship. Alaric, for the first half of the book, he's hardly present at all. And then when he does come in, it's kind of through these like little glimpses and flashes. And sometimes those glimpses and flashes are not very instructive. There are definitely times when I was trying to figure out, wait, is he with the Romans? Is he against the Romans? Because he seemed to go back and forth quite a bit. And there are major battles that are just kind of briefly said in passing. We don't really get into these major moments in time. You kind of have to already know that they happened in order to, I guess, get anything out of it. Instead, where the strength is here is not in its discussion of Alaric exactly, but Alaric is seen as an example of somebody who wanted to be, basically accepted by Rome, but Rome would not accept them. And Rome during this time, we can also see in Freeman, was very sort of xenophobic in a lot of ways. They were reversing a lot of the earlier laws, or at least ignoring them maybe, trying to grant more citizenship to people. Alaric basically wanted to be included in the Roman Empire, and he got so powerful that, his people basically referred to him as a king. He wasn't technically a king, but close enough. And by Rome continually basically denying him that, they create an enemy, and he ends up sacking Rome in 410. So this is more about the way that the Romans looked at immigration, the way that they treated the Goths, the way that they talked about them. And I don't think it doesn't take much to obviously see, I think, a modern connection for when this was published. This was published in 2020. I mean, you've got, of course, I'm in the United States, and immigration is always, a topic of discussion. But you had, immigration crises going on in Europe as well, whether it be refugees or whatever it might be. So it's not explicit, but it doesn't take much to see the parallel that's going on here. About Europe, basically, the way Europe is treating outsiders and discussing them with the way the Romans did so with the Goths. So I found that stuff to be also, though, interesting. Its depiction of this period of Rome, I actually was enjoying. I liked it quite a bit. I just didn't get much out of with the discussions of Alaric, just because they were kind of so few and not really in depth. So yeah, I guess it's kind of depends on what you're trying to get out of the book. If you want to learn a lot more about Alaric, you're not going to find out that much. But if you want to know about, sort of like immigration and Goths and that aspect of the Roman Empire at that time, I think it's worth reading. And like I said, it was actually ended up being a pretty good companion piece to AD 381, which was not expected by me, but I nevertheless appreciate it. So anyhow, those are the two books that I read in January for Historathon 2025. May not be the only ones I read in January for Historathon, but these are the first two. So we've got AD by Charles Freeman, AD 381, and we've got Alaric the Goth by Douglas Boin. If you've read either of these, I'd love to hear your thoughts. And as always, thank you, BookTube.